The Game Schooler Podcast is a weekly audio show that educates new and experienced gamers about the awesomeness of tabletop gaming. In this week's episode, we'll cover math games in the Game of the Week, discuss the secondary market for games in the School of Gaming, and wrap it up by revealing our top 10 games from 2014. Welcome to the Game Schooler Podcast. I'm your host, Doug Kotecki, along with my co-host, Dr. Michael McCabe. How's it going, Michael?
What's going on, Doug? How are you?
Good. Happy to be back.
Good.
I'm excited about this week's episode. After a little bit, we did some kind of jumbling around. What we teased you with last week, only one of the three will be happening.
Yes.
So we're flexing them around, but it's for good reason, I think. And a lot of it is based on feedback that we get from the Discord server. So,
Which is wonderful, because for the first 100 episodes, we had very minimal feedback. It was just based on email. And so it's really nice to get that level of feedback. So why don't you say more, Doug?
well, we've got a whole bunch of stuff going on in kind of follow-up. So we've updated our logo. So if you get the podcast feed, you should see an updated logo there. We've tried to update it across the website and most of our platforms. I still got some more to roll out, but we're doing that.
It looks good.
Thank you. Speaking of Discord, I spent some time and there was some discussion last week about focus and topics and things like that. So I kind of went through and streamlined a lot of the channels and revised their descriptions of what goes in those channels, made some new ones, renamed some things, just so it's a little bit clearer. So there's categories for people to ask for recommendations. There's people, if they're asking questions, if they want to follow up or comment on our High Five and School of Gaming type of thing. If they want to talk about family games, hobby games, children's games, and then sharing their great deals and things that they find in thrift shops and things like that, are all in the Discord server, gameschooler.com/Discord, if you're interested in checking that out. Just an
What
awesome
did you do
community.
with gamer games or hobby games? How'd you tweak that?
I changed it to hobby games, so I tried to keep it
Nice.
in line with
Consistent.
our branding of the way that we're classifying games. There's also a section there for new gamer enthusiasm. So if you're a new gamer, you've got questions about getting into the hobby, you're overwhelmed, that type of thing, you can go there and ask questions. One of the things I really like about our community is that they are very welcoming, very helpful and thoughtful. And it is a group that's very welcoming to gamers and non-gamers alike. So if you are just getting into this hobby, you're a family gamer, you want to play with your kids and your relatives, that type of thing, but you're a bit overwhelmed, this is a great community to jump into and kind of get your bearings about you. With that being said, we do get feedback from the Discord. So this week we're going to be talking about math games. So we've talked about a lot of that in the past, but there's a question of a recommendation on what games would be great for teaching math. And so we'll
Doug's
get into
going
that.
over his favorite worksheets that he ever had to do in school, right?
Yeah. Next week, there was a little discussion this week. Next week, we'll be talking about some classic games that deserve more respect in our High Five, which is another little discussion that happened in the Discord server. So great. We get a lot of great ideas from there. And even our School of Gaming next week comes from a contest that we had a couple of months ago. And we'll have a string of those coming out over the next couple of weeks. So I'm excited about the feedback and the different opportunities that the Discord allows us to engage with our listeners and provide content, hopefully, that they're enjoying and is present, current information. So how about you? Any follow-up for you?
I do. I have some follow-up to our podcast listeners from, I believe, just 2 weeks ago. We had a School of Gaming segment about the inner completionist. Do you recall?
I do, yes.
All right. Well, I buckled, and I'm a sucker for playmats, Doug. I've got the Wonderlands War playmat arriving today, a 24 by 36 inch playmat, which may never actually get used. I just want to own that. I think this is
You
the
just don't want me to
appropriate
break the game board.
channel. Well, I was going there. That's where that was the punchline I was building up to.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I was going there. But it's one of those things where, sometimes where we give wisdom and we talk about this, we talk about that. I think I made that purchase on the day that we recorded it. And it's just like, it comes full circle. 2 weeks later, it's arriving. And that's just one of those weird, goofy things of the hobby. I was bragging to my family the other day. It's been almost 2 months since I bought a board game. And that actually includes like a thrift store or a secondary market. But I know they'll get home from school, they'll see the playmat, and they'll just be waiting to, one, beat me with it because it will probably be in a circular tube, and two, just give me a hard time. Yeah, Dad, how's this?
I haven't bought any games, but I bought 8,000 accessories.
Or one.
Yeah.
But one very luxurious one that I certainly don't need. Who needs a playmat? But that's kind of where I am in the hobby at the moment. I know about a year ago, Stonemaier Games came out with a playmat for Tapestry. I was like, I've got to have that. It's compatible with every expansion they've made to date. Oh, that's going to be fun. So even, it might not be new gamer enthusiasm, but veteran gamer enthusiasm is running strong in some ways. And I think it's okay because that's where I'm at. So just wanted to follow up with that. It's not about perfection. It's about the journey, folks. At least that's how I'm justifying that.
Well, speaking of damaged board games, I'm letting Michael borrow a game that I've played with my daughter. My daughter loves it. I'm positive we'll talk about it in a future episode, so I don't want to spoil it. But it was one of those things where she was, doing her due diligence, picking up the game, and just decided to fold the board the wrong way and snapped a complete piece off of the side. And I think if that had happened to me 12 years ago, I would have been like, "What, child, what have you done?" And now I'm at the point where I'm like, this is a well-loved game. This game has been used and enjoyed. If I have to get another one, we'll get another one. But it almost, the nerdy collector in me at one point would have been upset about it. And now I almost have it as a badge of honor. There's we played this game out.
It's kind of like the difference from first child to third child. When you have that first child has to be perfectly groomed and freshly bathed for any company to come over, right? And everything has to look right. By the time you have a third child, when company arrives at the house, that third child is playing in their diaper out in the street in the middle of winter. That's just where you're at in the hobby.
Yeah.
You're a veteran.
Yeah,
New parent to
we got a pajama top, underwear, and rain boots on. We're fine. We're ready to go.
I was really glad you did the inventory of Concept Kids, though, so that I wouldn't get blamed for it when the game got returned to your house. So one of those check-in, check-out procedures that I'm glad we're sticking to.
Like a car rental.
Yeah.
We're gonna fine-tooth comb we're gonna catalog every piece together, so then when it comes back, we're gonna do that again.
Actually, you owe me a new copy of Concept Kids and $12.
Yeah, it needs to be a full tank of score sheets in there when you return it. So a lot of cool stuff is happening. What's awesome in gaming, Michael?
A lot. The Board Game Arena group is up and running. I know our Discord is still trying to figure out common dates and times of when to play, but I did see some games are up and starting. And there's some learning there with me. I was really happy that Anitra from the Family Gamers, great podcast, another family podcast. If you want to check them out, they do such good reviews. But Anitra mentioned, a table expires after 24 hours. So there was some of that shared learning of, that's why some of the tables in Board Game Arena are disappearing. That doesn't happen in real life.
Yeah.
So there's some of that's happening. And then in our house, we're in a really busy stretch right now that's almost coming to the end, but we're playing a lot of Similo and No Mercy and some of those fast card games that just stay out and about. that you could play with one player or play in with a family, but just those 10 to 12 minute type games.
Yeah.
I took a thrashing in Llama recently, which surprisingly at 2-player seems to last a lot longer than it does at 5 or 6-player. That game could go on at 2-player, like tug of war, but I digress.
Interesting.
And then you and I have just had an awesome time playing the Arnak campaign.
Yeah.
Does take us a good 2 hours to get through a level or a module or a campaign, whatever phrase you want to use, but
A chapter.
It's been a
I'll
fun
throw
little
in a-
Indiana Jones adventure.
Throw in another one.
Yeah.
I just wanted to look up. We were playing it just last night, and I wanted to see. I know what the base game says. Did want to see what the time.
I don't think it's changed. I think it both says 60 to 90
30 to
minutes on both.
120 minutes.
Okay, good.
So on the expansion, so 120 minutes is accurate.
At least they're honest.
yeah, for the most part.
How about you? What have you been playing? Anything new or different?
I got some games to the table with the youngest, and I pulled out a little stack of games of Drop It, Castle, My First Castle Panic, and Hammer Time, and she was like, "This is great. These are my favorite games." So when you have a 6-year-old telling you that these are their favorite games, it was a good little experience. As far as other things that are awesome, there is currently a Kickstarter going on for our good friend John Spike has a Kickstarter for his new game called Doom Scroll, which is a fantasy steampunk social media card game in which you are curating the most engaging social media feed in a fantasy world to be crowned the best advertising imp. It's a strategic card game for 1 to 4 players. And in that, I think there's a fun nature of the game with the fantasy setting, but also the concept of kind of a deeper social construct of the amount of time that we spend scrolling along through social media. And I think it's his hope that he gets the families that play the game have discussions about that after and kind of identifying that concept of doom scrolling through
Doom Scroll. Yeah.
through social media. So check that out if you're interested. He did the why can I not think of the other game?
Game Stormers.
Game Stormers.
Game Stormers
the name
was
of the
John
company.
Spike's first Kickstarter. It was successfully launched and delivered in 2023, I believe. Might have been 2022. I don't know where BGA settled on that, or Board Game Geek settled on that, pardon me. And now Doom Scroll is a follow-up in the same universe. Amazing art. Just really, really good art. And I haven't play tested or played Doom Scroll
Me
at
neither.
all. Although John is my neighbor right up the street, so probably within about 10 hours of recording, my mailbox will have something in it, and then I'll be obligated to play it that same day. But I'm looking forward to seeing it. Can't wait to see what John did.
Yeah. So that is some follow-up and some awesome things in gaming. Again, if you're interested in the Discord, you can
hold
sign
on.
up.
We're not moving on just yet, brother. We got two
sorry.
more to talk to people about.
Look at
because
this. Look at this.
Maybe you're going to edit this out, but we've also been playing a little bit of Pyramido and Forbidden Jungle.
Yeah.
And Pyramido was one that I nearly impulsed at Gen Con 2023, but my good friend Doug was like, hold off. We'll be able to get that at a later time and look at the 35 games we're already taking home each. So good to have good friends, right? And I don't want to say a whole lot about it because these are two potential games of the week as we continue to test and play with multiple people outside just the Doug and Michael verse or the Michael and Doug verse, whichever you prefer. But man, there's still good games getting made. That's all.
Yeah.
I'm having a blast getting to know both of those games.
Yeah, there is. Oh, there are so many games out. I think we'll talk about that in the School of Gaming because I think it definitely contributes to the secondary market for sure. But great, awesome games, and we like to try and do our due diligence and try and cover games and not that we're reviewers per se of the.
We're storytellers. We're board game storytellers.
We're giving you the hard line of this is terrible, this is great. But we do want to know what we're talking about when we talk about a game.
Ideally.
And try and cover it from as many angles as we possibly can. Again, we also follow the concept that there is a game for everybody and that no games are, for the most part, inherently bad. And so we want to make sure that we're kind of giving a broad spectrum and highlighting a game, being positive about games. And in order to do that, sometimes we do have to play games several times and have full player counts just so we're a little bit more comfortable.
Yeah.
But we do. I mean, I'm going to pull back the veil here. There are games that we play once and say, nope, that's not.
Yeah, it doesn't make it to the second time. It doesn't make it to bringing in a third or fourth player. It doesn't make it into another person's house.
Yeah, so it's things that we're excited about, we want to talk about, and we make sure that that's the case. Uh-oh, what are you laughing
I love
at?
the look on Doug's face when a game doesn't make it to that second play. It's like, gosh, oh man, I really want to. And it's probably the only time that my friend Doug doesn't finish sentences is right after we get done playing a game and Doug had really high hopes for it, read the rules, it crossed the rules threshold and get it to the table so it met the setup threshold. And then all of a sudden we play it and something just doesn't work. That might be something I'll have to capture on film sometime.
I'm Joe Pesci from Home Alone, is what you're saying?
Hey, you interpret it how you must. It's art.
I have trouble I do have trouble finishing sentences, and I just don't know what to say. I don't.
But only in those
words
moments,
escape me.
Doug.
Yes, yeah.
Only in those moments after we've played a game and you thought it was potentially a game of the week or one that could stay in your collection, and it immediately goes to never playing again.
Yep, don't need to play that one again. So, all right, anything else, Michael?
No, let's get into the games of the week.
All right. So just a reminder, if you like the Discord, you're interested in that, gameschooler.com/Discord. Spread the word about the podcast. We always love adding new listeners to the fold. And if you have questions or comments, you can certainly go to the Discord or email us, email@gameschooler.com. Now let's head over to the games of the week.
The game of the week. Did I blow out the mic or is that okay?
No, you're fine.
We're rolling. The game of the week is an in-depth look at a family-friendly game we think you should try if you get the chance. This week's a little different, folks. This week is math games. Doug, lead us into this segment.
All right. So we had a question from a listener asking if there was an episode where we discussed math games. And
Episode
we haven't.
159.
Yeah, it is now 159. And in thinking about this as a topic, it occurred to me, where do we put something like this? And I determined that if we were talking about math and gaming on a general scale, that would fall under the School of Gaming, a School of Gaming segment. We could also put math games into a high five, but I didn't want to rank these games or limit us to that number of games, right?
And
I
it would not allow us to generally talk about the different skills and different types of math that are encompassed in these games.
Yeah, and there's the amount of variables. So what age of kid you're playing with, what type of math you're looking for. There's so many that I thought this would be a great opportunity because they were kind of looking for recommendations or certainly an episode that they could send to a friend for them to listen to. And I thought it would be a great idea to highlight games that we have already covered in the Game of the Week in a broad sense, and that anybody that wanted to go back and say, hey, that game really sounds like it might work for me, then have an opportunity to go into past games of the week and listen to that episode to kind of get an expanded, blown out version of that game. Does that make sense?
Well, it does to me. I cannot answer for the listener on the other end. But yes, especially since we talked about it offline before we started to record. Makes sense to me.
Okay, good. So yeah, listen to these games, and if you want to dive into them deeper, you can go back and look at some to see if they would work for their family.
Yeah, the only other thing to just say, I know we have a global audience, and math, or as some of our listeners would say, maths, are taught differently at different places. When Doug and I were at Gen Con in 2023, there was a publisher who was very excited, very enthusiastic, and said that he game schools. He does Magic the Gathering for maths to get ready for a big math exam in the UK. It was like, oh, That's interesting. That works for you. That's probably not where this segment's going to go directly, but there's a lot of different ways to approach math within the hobby.
Yeah, so I broke down into a couple of categories
As did I.
as sequencing, counting, addition of subtraction, probability, multiplications, and then there's a handful of games that have kind of several of those kind of combined into one that I put into a separate category. You have
So Mr. Kotecki will be guiding us through pre-algebra today, it sounds like, Doug. That's
Yes.
good stuff, man.
Yeah. And I also organized my list into kind of the lowest barrier of entry and up. So the games that are less complex first, up to ones that would be later family gamers.
Yeah, and I just have one to add in there. It's currency, where you're doing a little bit with money where it doesn't necessarily feel like money. Any second, third, fourth grade teachers who are listening, or if special educators, anybody like that, currency can be a tough topic to teach. So that was one that I just pulled in. And then I have
great.
a little bonus, a dessert,
Okay.
if you will.
All right. Did you classify yours in a similar way?
Yeah, but very similar, Doug. Yeah,
All right,
I'll
that-
riff off
that-
yours.
Okay. So the first one I've got is sequencing, which is the order of numbers, right?
Yes, it
And
is.
I think
I can confirm.
Okay, good. You're the doctor here. You should know.
Stop it.
The first one I've got is llama, which you can do a better explanation of this because your daughter learned this through this game, right?
Yeah, during the pandemic when we were home playing a lot of games, my daughter, who was 3 into being 4 at that time, really learned numbers and colors from playing llama. In llama, there are 6 different cards, 1 through 6, and then there is a llama card that basically ends and you start over at 1. And so on your turn, you're playing the number that is out in front, or you're playing the next number in advance. So if a 1 is down, you can play a 1 or a 2, and it just goes all the way up until you get to 6, where you can play a 6 or a llama. And then at the llama, you can play a llama or turn it back around to 1. It plays really well with kids. It plays all the way up to 6 players. So if you have 2 packs of llama, you can essentially play with 12 kiddos in a classroom setting. And the other thing about it, it also is a good game. I've had
Yeah.
excellent luck with that at a after school board game club where kiddos will just rip the cards. I mean, they're having so much fun with it. So we don't need to do as deep of a dive with every game, but llama for sequencing, I think it works for 3 to 8 year olds really well. And same thing because the cards all have a very specific color. So you can kind of play by color as well for some of those younger kiddos.
Yeah. And we talked about that in depth on episode 144.
Who's the designer of that one, Doug?
I'm unfamiliar with him. He must be a new designer.
Dr. Rainer Knizia, mathematician from Germany.
I've not heard of him.
Yeah.
I'll look forward to
Physics was too easy for the good Dr. Rainer Knizia in college. Physics was way too easy, so he became a mathematician.
Okay, I'll have to keep
Back
an
to you,
eye out
Doug.
for his work. The other games I've got in sequencing are episode 140. Oh, look at this guy. Take some notes properly, Douglas. Maybe you've got it. No thanks and take 5.
Yeah.
What did we talk about that? When did we talk about that?
Well, those were in episode 144. We talked about Amigo card games, Take 5
Okay.
and No Thanks.
So I screwed up on llama. When did we talk about llama?
That's okay. You keep going. I've got the sheet right here. Llama was in episode 97. You said that
All right.
correctly, Doug.
No, I said 144. So llama 97, no thanks and take 5, episode 144. And these are games where you are in no thanks. You're counting. You've got cards from 1 to 33 or 36, something along those lines. Take 5 cards numbered 1 to 100, and you're putting them in order and getting penalized if they're out of order, or you're trying to cluster them together essentially. And so it's a great next step off from llama, where the the scoring and that type of thing is where you're trying to collect cards in order to limit your points, essentially. Kind of butchering that one, I feel like.
No, you're good. I also had Take 5 and account buys. So if you're in Take 5, also known by 6 Nimmt, you get punished badly if you end up with cards in your hand that are in multiples of 5. And so it's one of those that I've watched it happen with my own kids where they're doing the count buys and, here's a 55, here's a 60, here's a 65. And then you're looking at the bulls on the bottom of the card. You're penalized. So I also had that one in there from just a little different.
Yeah, the counting on that.
Math.
Awesome.
Yep.
And we did try. I did try and pay attention to the every game or a lot of games. You are going to be doing some sort of math for points. At the end of the game and scoring and things like that. Trying to pick out games that, if the points play into the math of the game, it's a pretty prominent part of the game. Not just, all right, it's the end of the game, let's count up points. Because a lot of games have that. So those games are not necessarily on the list. Following, I think, the most complex game as far as sequencing is concerned is Ohanami, which we talked about in episode 96, which is another one that has that push your luck element of once you add a number, you can't go back. So if I add the 5 and then I put down a 10, if I get a 6 later, I can't do anything with it. I kind of box myself out there. So knowing how many cards are in between, how many numbers are in between those determines how you're making those decisions of, that's a big enough gap. I don't want to jump that far, or I'm willing to take that risk.
Yeah,
and
I also had Ohanami listed under the category of multiplication because of how scoring works.
Yeah.
And certain cards only score in specific rounds. So there's a little bit of balancing that. Not that you're going to have clean multiplication, but that estimating of knowing, well, I've got a handful of these and a handful of those. So there's some of that in-game math that you're doing for yourself and for others as you're looking around the table.
Yeah, no, great call there. Moving,
I have one more in sequencing, if that's okay.
Go ahead. Yeah.
And I put it down as an advanced sequencing. I am looking more so, if you're teaching a computer science class, if you're teaching a business marketing class, and you're looking at getting some of the order of operations things down. And that's a game we talked about in episode 90 from Carl Chuddik, Red 7. And in Red 7, and Doug, maybe you can help me out here. We both own the game. I love the game, but I know you've played it a lot more than me. But the cards have unique abilities. So knowing when to play specific cards out, it can be really painful if you play the wrong card and somebody is able to capitalize on your mistake. And I think that's part of math, right? If you don't do math correctly, it can also be painful. But Red 7 was one that I had in more of that advanced category, just almost one step above Ohanami. So I don't know, it might be a reach there, but
no, I think that's great.
Really
I mean,
like that one.
In Red 7, you need to be winning at the end of your turn. So you can either play a card down, which has a number on it, which may allow you to get the highest number or complete the rule, or you need to change the rule so you're winning with the cards that you have played down. And yeah, there's definitely that coding and sequencing great for the advanced thinking, that's for sure.
Almost a little too advanced for my house. In my house, the Ohanami is the end.
Sure.
But I keep Red 7 because I love playing it. But frankly, it only works with my adult game group right now. It doesn't work in any other setting. So that's the only note of caution.
Yeah, and that is probably a very personality-based game. Like if you like solving that type of puzzle, you are going to love this game. And if that's not your type of thing, you're not as much of an analytical
monster.
Yeah. So, but great call there. Moving on to counting, the one I picked out for the youngest ones is Dragon Breath, one that I play with my kids quite a bit. We talked about this in episode 68. In Dragon's Breath, you are This is kind of a double one. It's got a little bit of the probability and predicting, and you're essentially taking a shower ring off of a stack, and gems are falling out. But before they do, you pick which one you think is going to have the most gems fall out. And then when that happens, you collect any of them that fall out. And at the end of the game, and this one really stands out for me because it is such a tactile counting game at the end when you're scoring. So playing this with my 5-year-old, my 4-year-old, 6-year-old, that type of thing, we get to the end of the game. Not only is it fun to see them strategize throughout and say, I think it's going to be red that the most are going to fall out. And you get that kind of probability type of thing by the way that they're teetering, almost like that arcade coin game where you put it, how many of them are going to fall off the ledge. But at the end, every time I've played this game, the tactile nature of taking all of your gems out of your secret compartment and counting them one by one, just it's learning, and my kids are having such a good time doing it. Like, how many cool gems did I collect? And the pride and the joy while they're doing that, I think, is what makes this so great for younger gamers.
Awesome. What else do you have for counting games?
The similar one is Hammer Time, also dealing with the gems, same type of gems, same company. They're both by Haba. We talked about this in episode 146. But this one, every time you're basically hitting a hammer against a box, the gems are falling off. But if more than 8 fall off, you bust.
Yeah.
So every time somebody plays, your kids have an opportunity to count the number of gems that have fallen off, and then taking that and then putting in and kind of completing orders. So there's a couple of opportunities there for the managing the resources and the counting. Moving on, a little bit higher up is Downforce. Episode 34 we talked about. There's a racing game in which as you play the cards, you are moving the cards forward based on the number that is on the card. So essentially a roll and move with a little bit more to it. But I think this one is approachable for younger gamers. What are you laughing at,
No,
Michael?
I'm laughing because I listen to a lot of podcasts. I consume a lot of board game content, and I don't know many that make the jump from Hammer Time to Downforce. But it's a really good jump and you just went there. It is approachable. You could still play that with 10, 12, 14, 16-year-old kiddos. Are going to have a blast, and there's a ton of counting in there. And I'll send it back to you. But that's what I was chuckling at. We went from Haba to Restoration Games, and I think in a great way. So
and not only are you just counting out the cards and the moves and things like that, but there is the position of trying to analyze where that car is going to end up.
Yeah.
Right? How far forward are they going to go? Are there going to be any blocking? That type of thing. So it's not literally just playing a card and going boop, 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 7 spaces. There is that in the game, but there's a little bit more around it, which I think is what adds another level to it.
So basically what we're saying is you can go from playing Dragon's Breath to Hammer Time to Downforce to gambling on the Daytona 500 all
Pretty
in a
much.
weekend. Right, Doug?
Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah.
good.
If you got
full
a
math
math
curriculum
magician.
right there.
Yeah. The last one I've got for counting is Dice Hunters of Therion.
Good one.
We talked about this one in episode 141. And this, as you're trying to accumulate the swords to defeat the monster, you've got to be counting that. You're trying to figure out how much your opponent has, how many dice it's going to take to beat it, whether you want to try for that. And that counting of the swords is basically the crux of the game.
It's the game. Yeah.
But it is so unbelievably fun while you're doing it and watching that. When you say, I need 3 more, I hope this dice rolls good for me.
And ties don't go in your favor. The tie favors the previous one who's on it. So there's that addition, even by adults, to try to figure out, I needed 14, not 13.
Yeah, even if it's something is this even possible with the dice that I have?
Yeah.
Like that kind of calculation before you even start rolling is like, I'm only rolling 4 dice. There's no way I can get that. You're throwing in that probability of like, technically I could get a 12 if I rolled 3 swords on all of my dice. but the odds of that happening are slim. So maybe I'm not even going to go for it. So some of those calculations are happening as well. Anything else for you from counting?
Yeah, in counting and grouping, I had 2 games that we haven't talked about yet. I hope I'm not jumping in on where you're heading, and they're almost a little mini genre within the family genre, but little city building games as well. And the first one is Machi Koro 2, which we talked about in episode 63. And I went with Machi Koro 2 just because of the speed of play and the type of just how it's that currency category for me. And I think
Yeah.
I'll be clearer and more succinct in the next one, and that's Happy City, episode 55. And in Happy City, you're just getting a few cards out, and you get currency each round based on the cards that are out in front of you. So there's that in-game calculation that you have to go through with your money, and it comes into buying new cards. And at the end of the game, it's your happiness times your citizens that gives you your score. So if kiddos are really advanced in math, they could be calculating what people are scoring out at all times. And then if kiddos are a little more fragile in math, they can just be worried about their own. And I like both of those games just from the currency standpoint too. The money is looks a little bit different, feels a little bit different, and just is a little bit more whimsical and fun.
Yeah, and I've got both of those under multiplication as well.
Yep.
So great games, especially with the Machi Koro, when you roll a number and you may have 5 buildings that activate the same ability. And at that point, you're going to do 5 times the payout you normally would. So that not only Happy City has the multiplication at the end game scoring, and Machi Koro has it during the game while you're calculating the different payouts for your buildings. Those are great choices. In addition to subtraction, I've got Ticket to Ride First Journey as a starting point as your, and maybe that's more of a counting one, actually, now that I think about it, because there is no end game scoring in Ticket to Ride First Journey, but counting up the number of train cards you need to put your trains on the track is a good one. So that should probably go under counting. So we talked about that one in episode 24. The first one that I have for addition and subtraction is King of Tokyo. We talked about that way back in episode 10, and this is going to apply to a couple other games. So if you're cascading it down, you're going to go King of Tokyo, then something like Disney Lorcana or Magic, those type of trading card games, and top out with something like Dice Throne. And these are all games that kind of have attacking and defense, and so you're always subtracting and adding power and health and all of those type of attacks that are happening throughout the game. It's not necessarily, at the end of the game, we're going to add up points. No, you start with 50 life points, or you start with 10 life points, and you're slowly going down or adding up throughout the game. So I think those are great games for addition and subtraction in a streamlined way. Yes. Mike.
Yeah, I just had one to add, and it's at that higher end as well, and that's Heat: Pedal to the Metal, game that we talked about in episode 103, that in the game, and I made the mistake about the first 3 times I played it, but you have to calculate how much speed you could take into each corner. And folks, if you're off by 1 when you go through the corner, you spin out and bad things happen. And it's that same in-game addition, subtraction, not necessarily in a fighting game, but in a racing game with cards in your hand, where the card play determines, and the math outcomes of the card play determines what happens to your characters in it. So that was it's interesting that we had very similar groupings and yet could come up with different games. I love what you were saying about some of those battle games and those attack games, and I also see that in Heat as well.
Yeah, so King of Tokyo we talked about in episode 10, Disney Lorcana 145, Dice Throne was episode 101. And the big one here for addition and subtraction kind of goes out of, and it's more addition, but is the Big Brother Ticket to Ride. So you are calculating scores while the game is going on, and there's end game scoring. And it's a great one with kind of unique. It's not always adding 1 point. Sometimes you're adding 3. Sometimes you're adding 5. You're adding 7 onto 27. So you're getting interesting math problems as opposed to just, okay, I'm counting up. At the end of the game, it's add 18 points to that. And you can
Yeah.
either count it out or, if these are another thing I want to talk about is that these are things that you can dictate how your child is going to do that. You have control over that. So you can say, I want you to count up the score, or, hey, how about you get a sheet of paper and you're going to do 27 plus 18 and we're going to figure that where your marker can go. And that's something as the adult and the facilitator that you have the option to incorporate how you want to do these things, right?
Yeah. Yeah, with a map of the United States in the Ticket to Ride example. It's interesting because, just a month and a half ago, my wife and I played the big box game with our 8-year-old, and not First Journey, because my wife said, no, let's get the map. And then there was a ton of math that was involved, just like you're talking about, because my very confident 8-year-old would not let me move the token. She had to be able to move the token each time. No, that's 4, and count them out.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4. 17 to 21. Boom.
Yeah.
And there is a lot of that. And also, it's not just math. You're going to get other subjects in a lot of these games.
Yeah. So we talked about that in episode 2. The other one I've got, and we've talked about a couple of these games already, is probability. I think there's some good probability exercises in Dragon's Breath and certainly in Heat Pedal to the Metal, which you talked about. The big one for this one is Catan, where you are placing out a building or your towns and villages, and they are connected to resource generation hexes that pay out depending on dice rolls. And so the odds of getting a 7 and an 8 or a 9 and 6 are better than a 12 being rolled. So that's determining where you're putting your starting cities and where you want to expand to. If you want a deep dive into this on our Discord server, we have a whole probability exercise based on Catan that you can download for free and use with your kids to just show and teach them as kind of an adjacent project of why the 7s, 8s, and 6s come up more frequently than the 12s, 2s, and 3s.
Yeah, so before you take your 14-year-old to Vegas or your friendly local casino, download that and have some fun with it. Episode 14 was when we discussed Catan as our game of the week.
And the last one I have for probability is, and I'm interested to see what your thoughts are on this, is Kazuka. Episode 133 is the idea of you have a list of the number of colored cards in the deck, and you are trying to secretly convey information using subtle hints and information from the other players to determine if you actually have enough of those cards to advance forward on the track. And I think that there is a little bit of, well, there's only 6 of these cards in there. Is it possible that we have all of them?
Yeah, the limited communication is tough, though, with Kazuka. Yeah.
So
that's where...
maybe a stretch, but moving on is multiplication. We talked about Happy City, episode 55.
Yep.
We talked about Machi Koro. The other big one is sitting behind me on the shelf, and that's King Domino. The way that you play the tiles down, you are going to be multiplying the size of each different terrain by the number of crowns in there. So you have to be actively watching that throughout the entire game. It's not something, although it does determine your final score, you have to be aware of it throughout the entire game or you're going to get destroyed. So I think that's a great one for early learners.
Yeah, the one that I have listed is actually sitting behind your other shoulder in your room, and that's Point Salad from episode 6. Were you going to go there next about multiplication?
No, I actually have that. I have it under my multiple because I think there's addition and multiplication throughout that entire game. But go ahead.
Yeah, each card has 2 sides to it. There's a vegetable on one side and then a scoring possibility on the other side of the card. And those scoring possibilities are only listed once, and they are in all sorts of different combinations. This is a game that Doug and I both love, and I think the Game Schooler podcast loves more than most just by the amount that we've talked about it over the last 159 episodes. We've taught this game at local game stores before, and one that somewhat disappeared since it came out and hit. And there's a ton of math in there. It works really well for a lot of different groups. And just a great game to check out. And that's from AEG and Molly Johnson and Robert Melvin and Sean Stankovich and design team who've done a lot of really good card games.
Yep. Awesome. The other ones I've got, Acropolis is another one with a multiplication scoring system that you kind of need to be aware of throughout the game. Stepping up the complexity a little bit more. Bunny Kingdom is entirely based on multiplication tables to score out points at the end of the game. And then if you're looking for something crunchy, an upgrade above Point Salad, a game like Marvel Remix, where you're adding, multiplying different combos and the way that you settle on your 8-card deck at the end of the game and kind of keeping track. That one is like constant nonstop math throughout the entire game.
And action. It's a ton of fun.
Yeah, we talked about Acropolis 128, Bunny Kingdom episode 18, Marvel Remix 111. I only have one more game left that we haven't covered. We talked
Out of
about
all
Point
of our
Salad.
158 games, or
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's Challengers, which I think is one that has a kind of that multiple different things going on in which you're trying to capture the flag, the way that the cards come out, their strength and value, and there's a constant comparison back and forth, and there's different cards that allow you to have power-ups. So you're adding points on, and then some cards may reduce an opponent's strength, so you're taking some off, and I think there's a lot of different things packed up into a very simple and approachable game. Anything else that we haven't covered yet that was on your list?
I think that's a pretty good coverage of the subject math in games, and anyone who's listening, you've got a lot of different directions to go. What we didn't really cover, it's just dependent on age and the learner. Because the thing that's misleading about math, you will have 8 or 9-year-olds that are at a higher math level than a lot of 16 and 17-year-olds. You just will, especially those gifted and talented kiddos. And certainly the opposite is true. You better have a lot of 16 and 17-year-olds that are at a higher level than 8-year-olds. So similar to board games where the age on the side of the box isn't always the best indicator, when you're getting into the subject of math, you know what kids need. And we hope that this has been at least a little bit of audio research to our listeners out there who are game schooling and who are very curious about different games. And our Discord's a great place to follow up. You can also email us too if you have very specific questions, anything like that.
Yep.
So,
and there's a handful that both of us have played. We have not had it as a game of the week that I thought I should throw out there. And that's Dragonwood.
Now I have a few. Go ahead. What do you have?
Dragonwood, Sleeping Queens, the game Quick and Easy, and Uno were just a couple that popped
And
into my head. That
Miyabi from Haba, the Kiesling game where you're multiplying based on the number of levels you go up. So that was one for just rattle them off. Yeah, that's good.
Yep. All right. So those are some math games for you. Hopefully, like Michael said, they're kind of weird to fit in, and you know your kids better than we do. So hopefully you've got some options there, and you can go back into past episodes and dive a little bit deeper into those. With that out of the way, let's move on to the School of Gaming.
The School of Gaming. In the School of Gaming, we discuss concepts, keywords, etiquette, and helpful ideas in the world of gaming. This week, we're going to discuss the secondary game market.
Yeah, how the secondary market for games works has changed quite a bit over the years, and tips and tricks, ideas. Let's open it up. How does it work, Michael?
Yeah, let's have a conversation here. And I broke it down into 4 different larger groupings or categories. Board Game Geek, eBay, Facebook, and Game Store. So maybe just 4 different places. But I defined a secondary game market and the what as a person or place selling a game after somebody else has owned it. So somewhat vague, but also specific. You're not buying a game at Target. You're going to buy a game that somebody else bought at Target. And I don't know if that's an okay place to start and we just riff on it from there, or did you want to go in a different direction?
No, that's great. I think,
Yeah.
well, and it doesn't necessarily mean that the game is used.
No, a lot of
it
times
could-
you'll see NIS, new and shrink.
It could be completely brand new. It's just not bought from the original person that bought it.
Yeah.
I think the interesting thing before we go into actually where you can get some of these things, I do want to highlight that this has changed over the past couple of years. When I first got into the hobby, the idea of getting a game and it kind of holding its value and being a little bit more collectible was a bigger thing than it is now. And I think that the popularity of gaming as a hobby, the popularity spiked during COVID when more people are stuck at home and they started buying and accumulating games because they had nothing else to do, coupled with Amazon and other online retailers kind of driving down the price. You now have an MSRP that's 40 that Amazon is selling for 30 or $25 or way less, depending on what sale is going on, to then people are buying that at $25. And then when they go to resell it because they didn't like it, they played it, they're done with it, well, now they can only get $10 to $15 out of it. 5, 10, 15. So that secondary market value has dropped because of how many games are now available, how many games are coming out. The market is flooded. People don't have enough time to play the games. And I would say that it's probably never been a better time to buy used games if you want to avoid the hotness and the hype.
Yeah, and the other thing, you could also add a 0 to what Doug just said. So there's the Kickstarter factor. You'll get people who will buy a Kickstarter for $400, $500 and then either play it or it'll just sit there and they're tired of looking at it. And that's where all of a sudden, you might be able to pick it up for $179.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I will lead into, shipping matters. So just take that into consideration. I'm not going to talk about it every category, but there's one specific category that I know that's where I factored into my decision making. I use the secondary market for currently for two different reasons. One is if I know I want the game, and if it is out of print or if it's just a little too much at a friendly local game store, I'll set almost like a price in my head. And when I see it for that, good, I'm happy I got it at that amount, right? And then the other is to try games that I can't easily get. And I don't go to that one as much anymore just because of our podcast and I don't want to say our ability to get games because that really sounds like a snob, but we're at places where games are. And that wasn't always the case for me. 4 years ago, I wasn't going to Gen Con. I wasn't going to trade shows. And so I just want to, that access also matters, right? If you're not going to conventions or we want to try a lot of games. I want to try a lot of games, but also just for our podcast. So there's a couple caveats in that, but I do want to dig in if that's okay and just jump. The first one, Board Game Geek, almost has like 3 different places where you can buy games. They have the marketplace, which is where other people are selling games, and sometimes those other people are game stores or people who have their own business or had their own business or people with very large collections, and you can see, oh, this person has done 950 sales in the past and they have a really good reputation. And that's almost just like buying at an online store. The Board Game Geek marketplace. I have very little experience in that market, but that's one place that I know a lot of business gets done. I don't know if you want to say anything more about that, Doug.
No, it's a great, I've used it several times, and it's a great place to have a little bit more of that traditional buying experience with, it's an eBay experience on Board Game Geek where people are selling the games, and it's a place where people know the value, a little bit better. So you're not going to get, oh, I've got this copy and it's on Board Game Geek you can get it for $15, and if you get it on eBay they're trying to sell it for $30,
Sure.
because they bought it for however, or they just don't know. like, yeah, no, this game's everywhere. Nobody wants it. It's $15, like that type of thing. So I think just watching those ratings and making sure you feel like you got as good of trust as you can through the information provided when buying through that type of scenario.
And then also on Board Game Geek, you can make trades, and that's where the information, the only thing you really know is the positive, neutral, and negative of what people have made trades on. So if somebody's made 100 trades and if they are 97% positive and 3 neutral, that's probably, you're going to get the game in the condition that they're advertising it. The issue with that is it is a trade. So there is some back and forth. The games are getting shipped, and sometimes things can happen if a heavier game, if Acropolis, which weighs like 8 pounds, is sitting on a little card game, that little card game might get smashed, even though they tried to do what they could, but they're making their first or second trade. So you get some of that in that experience. I've had just really good luck with the trades on Board Game Geek. It is right now my main place where I do get games on the secondary market. I'll jump back and forth a little bit here. I'm going to compare that to Facebook. Facebook, you can buy anything you want on Facebook, right? What used to be on eBay is now on Facebook. And I don't have the stomach to pay for shipping. Something might look like a really good deal, but I don't want to pay that $17.79 to get that really good deal to my house. And I'm not consuming games right now at the level that I was 2-3, certainly 4 years ago. But I know 2-3 years ago, if we were having this conversation, I would be able to tell you which Facebook group to go to, which buyers to look for, to have a couple connections, know this guy out in Maryland, this guy in California. They're going to ship you great things better than the retail stores. The thing about the secondary market on Facebook, you do have essentially retail store owners that they're selling their inventory on Facebook Marketplace. And so that there's just a ton of different groups. I know I live in Wisconsin, and I'm a part of a Wisconsin board game group on there, and almost daily there's hey, I've got this Oathsworn, or hey, I've got this other 4X game, and people will just advertise right through Facebook Messenger. Little notifications will pop up about different things. And that is where I have had good luck at buying games that are no longer in print. Comparing to trading on Board Game Geek. That's a comparison I was going to make. Trading on Board Game Geek, if it's out of print, I mean, I've gotten lucky, but if you're not with initiating the trade, whereas Facebook, really watching, it's like Airlines Europe was a game that I wanted for ever, and it just popped up on Facebook one day and got it. Same thing with there's a Snow White gemstone mining game that got that off of Facebook. So I've had really good luck at getting some of those out of print games over time in that secondary market space.
Yeah, awesome.
Keep going, and the third place on Board Game Geek, and this one might make Doug chuckle a little bit, but in the flea market forum, and don't worry, you'll still have both of your kidneys, but in the flea market forum, they have auctions. And a real-time example, when Doug mentioned Challengers and math, Challengers is a game that you can actually subscribe to the auction. So just 2 days ago, I was watching an auction for Challengers and a game called Barcelona, because Barcelona is one I really want to try. It's a midweight Euro. It looks great. And Challengers is one I know I want to own. So it kind of met both those. And then I could save on shipping, right? So I thought, hey, if it's $35 and I'm going to get both of those games, I'm happy. And then there's also that point where you can just kind of step out. It is an auction. Sometimes the auctions do go over weeks at a time, and obviously people will jump in and snipe it right at the end. But I've had really good luck at getting multiple games at a time and being very picky and discerning, right? Because I can set the price. I know what the shipping's going to be before I could do all of that research on the front end. I know that this person lives in Michigan. I know I can calculate roughly the cost to get it to my house. And I know for $44, I'll get these 2 games. Just an example, hypothetical. But then once somebody bids $1 higher, I'm out. I'm off the hook. So like for me, where I'm at now in my gaming enthusiasm and life, and having and sticking to tight budgets, because when games come into the house, I no longer can justify or feel good about them. I need to be able to say, look, no, I paid $38.50. I got those 3 games. It's a great deal. The auction, and it's hit or miss. I'm not in there all the time. Every 3 or 4 months, I kind of just stop in, see if there's any really good ones. But that if people who are leaving the hobby, and sometimes estate sales will also be in there. It's very few and far between. But if somebody's passed away and just has a huge collection, you can go through. It's a good way to pick up multiple games and have a level of control that I appreciate having over the dollar for dollar spend.
Yeah. Another place it's become more popular recently is, certainly we've talked about Noble Knight in the past. They sell pre-owned games. But there are a lot of local game stores that are now getting into consignment and kind of working that out, where you buy a game in the store, but then the person that's selling it gets credit at the store.
Yep.
Type of thing. And so that's more common. You can certainly get games at thrift shops. The people on our Discord seem to have a lot of luck
Magical
doing
thrift
that.
shops.
One of the things I wanted to highlight, which is kind of the pro of getting something on the secondary market, is as we are family gamers and we are budgeting and trying to make every dollar stretch and get the most out of our money, not only does buying save you money on the front end, but I think when that investment is a little bit lower and I can say, hey, I only got this game for $5 or $10, and whether you liked it or your family is no longer in that season and you're just ready to move on, it makes it a lot easier to kind of just donate it or pay it forward and help somebody else out, as opposed to, I spent $400 on this Kickstarter and I need to squeeze every drop of money I can out of it. And I think it's kind of a hidden back end bonus of buying through the secondary market.
And if you're taking them into a school space, for a board game club, I've got about 12 to 15 games that just stay in a bag. That most of those games were at the secondary market. They're at Noble Knight. I bought them off Facebook. I got them in a trade from Board Game Geek. I don't have, $200 invested in that game. You're right. You're spot on with that, Doug.
And you're not worried about it getting destroyed when it goes.
No, you just want people to play the game.
Yeah. So that's another thing where it's, okay, I don't know if the kids are going to take care of this, so I'll get something that's already beat up a little bit, you know, and maybe I get it for a fraction, pennies on the dollar, because it's got a dent in it that nobody else wants. I'll take it. And
I'll take that dent.
Yeah, exactly. Anything else, Michael?
No, I think we covered a lot.
All right. So that is some secondary information on the secondary market for games. If you got any more questions or tips, feel free to go to the Discord and pop into the School of Gaming channel and let us know your thoughts there. Let's move on to this week, a top 10. If you're anything like us, you're constantly on the hunt for new games to try out. This week, Michael and I are going to be taking a look at our top 10 games from 2014, 10 years ago. How'd your list come together, Michael?
It was a tough list to narrow down to 10, Doug. There were a lot of really good games. And, we've talked about New Gamer Enthusiasm, but a number of these, I just have a lot of fond memories.
Sure.
And there's some sentimentality in it because it has to do when I first started coming to game night at your house. So I could think, this is when I played with Dan and Jenna, and this is when Doug's game room was in a different location. Or I remember playing this with our wives, and we had so much fun. So it was tough to cut to 10. How about you?
And it was one of those where I guess every time I do a list where it's this of a year or something where clearly there's going to be more than 10 games, I try to sort it by, and it gets to where you're picking between children in a way where it's like, how do I even pick which one? And I always tend to go, first and foremost, which one am I most likely, like if somebody said, I want to play this right now, I'd want to play it. And then coupled with weeding out so that there's kind of a variety of different types of games. So it's like I don't just have 10 card games, that type of thing. But certainly a lot of games to choose from, that's for sure.
Yeah, there really were. And number 10, I'm just going to go ahead and jump right in if that's okay. And it's from the Pandemic universe, and that's Pandemic: The Cure, designed by Matt Leacock. Why are you laughing?
Also my number 10.
Oh, awesome. And so designed by Matt Leacock, Z-Man Games. Didn't know that Chris Quilliams was in on the art, but one of the three artists on it. And in Pandemic, it's like I said, in the Pandemic universe, but you're chucking dice, which, are you kidding me? You include Pandemic with dice. One of the first games that I played at game night at your house, so that's that sentimentality factor I can recall. Playing the game and having fun and just feeling that sense of being welcomed. And I got to play the game, when the rules were explained, because the rules are dead simple. You could just get after it and try to cure that virus. So that's my number 10.
Yeah, the thing I like about this one is it sets up fast. It gives me the feeling, a feeling of Pandemic. But what I really love about it is, in most dice rolling games, they kind of have like that Yahtzee mechanism where you have up to 3 rolls to kind of get what you want. In Pandemic: The Cure, you can roll as many times as you want, but every time you roll a biohazard symbol, it's locked. And those biohazard symbols are increasing the threat and making it harder for you to do. So it's one of those things where it's like, I kind of like this roll. I wish it was a little bit better. Do I risk potentially rolling bad? But you can keep doing it. And sometimes it gets down to a point where it's like, no, we really need that. So you just need to keep going until we get that side of your dice. So a game that sets up fast and has a lot of the same feeling of Pandemic, but in a faster package and in a unique push your luck element.
And not to just completely activate people's consumerism out there, coming off the last segment that we had with Secondary Market, but a game that I have seen for $5 and $10 very recently for sale. So a nice little game, or a nice game in a little box.
Awesome.
Number 9 for me was our game of the week in episode 42, and that's Colt Express, designed by Christoph Rainbow. Ludonat is the publisher, was a Spiel des Jahres winner. I'm not going to say a whole lot about it because I'm fairly confident my friend Doug will also want to jump in on it at some point. But for me, it is at number 9. It's a programming game where you decide what actions you're going to do. There's a great little toy factor because it's on a train, and one that we really enjoyed telling the story about back in episode 42.
Awesome. My number 9 we talked about earlier in this episode, and that is Red 7. Talked about that in episode 90. Published by Asmodee Games, Carl Chuddik and Chris
Not
Cieslik.
Asmodee.
Yeah, Asmodee, correct. Just a great little card game, plays fast, and like I said earlier, that analytical mind, if you've got that and trying to kind of solve a problem every round of how can I be winning at the end of my turn, I just love that puzzle every turn. So that's my number 9, Red 7.
Awesome. My number 8 is Star Realms. That you compete head-to-head to create the most powerful deck of spaceships and bases. It's a deck builder. Hard to believe that it's already been out since 2014. There's a ton of expansions for Star Realms. There's a whole different game called Fantasy Realms, and Cthulhu Realms is out there as well. What's that?
Hero Realms,
sorry, set in a fantasy universe, but in Star Realms, there's one of 4 different factions, and those and you have bases, and that you can put out to try to protect yourself, and you're just trying to attack the person across from you. It's a phenomenal. There's a phenomenal app as well. So it's a game that I've enjoyed. A game that's still in my collection, even though I don't know if I'll ever actually play the card-based version again, because I have Hero Realms and I enjoy playing the app. But I've had a lot of fun playing that one.
Yeah, I thought that'd be on your list. It was on my short list, but I knew you'd throw it on there.
Yep.
Michael was correct on his number 9. It is my number 8, and that is Colt Express, episode 42. Colt Express is a great programming game. You're playing cards out. Some of them are face up, some of them are face down, So you don't always know exactly what your opponents are doing as you move your bandits around the train trying to collect as much treasure and loot as possible. Sometimes you end up shooting nobody. Sometimes you punch the air. Sometimes you punch the wrong person. And that hijinks that happens in such a simple game, there's no wonder that this one was highly decorated when it came out. That is my number 8, Colt Express.
Really good. My number 7 actually started out as number 1, and then I kept bumping games down. So that kind of tells you. But number 7 is Splendor, 2014. Obviously, Marc Andre, Space Cowboys published it. But there are just beautiful little chips and tokens in there, and amazing cards, and you're turning in chips to get cards, and all while trying to just build. And it has since been replaced for me by Splendor Duel, the 2-player only version. But the initial Splendor, I'd play it right now. Like, especially if 3 or 4 people just want to sit down and play Splendor. There's 3 different not levels, but powered decks. How would you say that? There's how would you
3
explain?
levels of cards.
3 levels of decks, which progressively feel more and more awesome as you're playing the game.
Yeah.
And that's my number 7 is Splendor.
All right. My number 7 is, I don't believe you've played this one, Michael, but it is Dead of Winter, a Crossroads game, published by Plaid Hat Games, Jonathan Gilmour, and Isaac Vega. This is a cooperative hidden role game in which everybody has secret objectives that you don't know about. And as a result, people are doing a lot of shifty stuff throughout the game. And each round there's a new kind of objective, and you need to collect so many food to get the bonus or to survive. And Michael's over there, and it's like, I feel like you're hoarding food, Michael. And
Usually.
and so you can then kind of vote people out of the colony. And if they happen to be zombies, great. They reveal themselves, and now they're actively working against you. If not, they're now going to be outside, actively working against you. And it's got this cool mechanism where the player that just took a turn is going to pull a card off the top of the deck and watch what the current player is doing. And if at any point they trigger whatever the trigger is on the card, it becomes a little narrative point, and there's a decision that needs to be made. And it just adds this whole storytelling aspect to the game every time I play it, where it's like, why were you over there? You are not with us, are you? And in such a cool way that's not just a typical werewolf is like, he looked at me weird. No, it's like they're doing weird stuff, but in order for them to win, we have to win as a group, and you need to accomplish your mission. So it adds a lot of cool dynamics into it, and that's my number 7, Dead of Winter, a Crossroads game.
Awesome. My number 6 we talked about all the way back in episode 64, and all the way back about an hour ago when we were discussing math, and that's Outfoxed. Outfoxed is published by Gamewright, and the designer is Colt Tippeton Johnston, Shannon Lyon, and Marissa Pena. And in Outfoxed, you've got this fox who is trying to get away. They're trying to hightail it out and get away with the pies, and you're trying to figure out who it is. So you're gathering little clues and trying to piece together who the guilty suspect is. I love the level of direct personal agency that kiddos get when playing with an adult. I certainly don't have grandchildren yet, but there are games where it's like, oh, this is one I would love to revisit again down the road with younger people. Yeah. Just a fantastic game. I'm surprised by how much fun I have playing that. So
yeah, I agree. It's my number 6 as well. So another crossover there, and it's one of my most highly regarded children's game that I have. It works every time we play it. It is one that as my kids age out of it, I will probably never get rid of, because I think it is that strong of a game that, like you said, Michael, when you have grandkids or things like that as the years go on, that's a perfect one to pull out and play. And so it's my number 6 as well, Outfoxed.
Awesome. And Doug, my number 5, I'm shocked, truly shocked that this has not been a game of the week. And if it has, then we must have spelled it wrong in our game tracker. But that's Beastie Bar. Has that not been a game of the week?
It has not. No, that was on my short list. Yeah.
Designer Stefan Kloss. Oh, so there's no crossover, so I can go all in on it here?
Go all in on that.
All
one.
right. Designer is Stefan Kloss. Well, guess what, folks? And Zoek Verlag is the publisher. That's not the guess what. But you're an animal. You're trying to get into this dance club, but there's a line, and you want to make your way to the front of the line, but don't be at the back of the line, because then you might get bumped out. Oh, but your animals have abilities, and the abilities are very thematic and awesome art. Yeah, but it gets better. The game plays in like 20 minutes, and even I could teach it to a group of strangers right now. It's dead simple. It's a ton of fun. And there's a little story behind it. Our families were vacationing together, and Doug picked this up at Titan Games in Springfield, Illinois, of all places, not to overshare. And I was like, that's not the most Doug-like game to get. I'm looking at the little box. I see, okay, it's got some cool art. But then when we played it and the amount of fun that we had with our game group, and then I've also had that fun in a middle school setting with other people's kids who I may not like a whole lot, and with my own children and my own extended family, just a wonderful experience of a game. And there's still a game there. I mean, you have to use the abilities of the animals to your own advantage. A little bit of meanness, but I've had a ton of fun playing Beastie Bar.
Yeah, the second guessing of, I think I'm going to play this card, and then all of a sudden somebody plays the next card, and like, I did not anticipate that happening, and that unraveled quickly.
Yep.
Is pretty cool. No, great pick there. My number 5, I'm assuming, is going to be on Michael's list, and that is Sheriff of Nottingham. We talked about that in episode 121, published by Simon. Sergio Halaban and Andre Zatz are the designers. A great bluffing game, one of the few bluffing games that I enjoy, in which you are trying to bring goods in past the sheriff. You have to declare your goods, and it's up to the sheriff to decide whether he's going to look in your bag or not, because you may be smuggling contraband, which is worth more points than regular goods. And so there's this cat and mouse game of trying to tempt the sheriff to either open or not open. And you may slide some money across the table so he doesn't. And that bluffing is awesome, and it's awesome because you can win this game without bluffing a single time, which I think is cool as well. So that's my number 5, Sheriff of Nottingham.
Awesome. My number 4, I think Doug's going to talk about, because he already did, and that's Red 7. And we covered it a lot. But the one thing that I want to add into it, it really put that designer and design team of Carl Chuddick and Chris Cieslik on the map for me. And I've since, explored and tinkered around and played a few other games, and there's just something about the card game with Red 7 that is so darn simple of, I have to be winning at the end of my turn. And that constraint just forces some really good thinking and decision-making, the right type of competitiveness. So we've talked about it. We talked about it all the way back in episode 90. If you want to hear more, I think we are major fans of that game. And so that's what I'll say about that one.
All right. My number 4 is a game that I should get to the table with Michael sooner rather than later, and that is Abyss. Publisher is Bombix, the designer Bruno Catala and Charles Chevalier. I don't know. I'm sorry.
Good try.
Apologize. But in Abyss, you are kind of building a little underground world and trying to get the influence of stronger sea creatures to then get more points. But the way that you kind of press your luck trying to get the cards that you need to acquire those politicians and monsters and things like that is a really cool system to do that as you're trying to build sets in order to collect these characters and acquire locations that give you more abilities. The artwork on this is just phenomenal and just a cool game, and that is Abyss.
Awesome. My number 3, I want to thank our friends over at the Family Gamers. They talked about this game quite a bit, and that's Deep Sea Adventure. Deep Sea Adventure is a Sasaki and Sasaki game published by Oink, which, in the gamer world has become darlings. Doug, everything okay over there? I feel like got jabbed in the eyeball, man. All right, back to our regularly scheduled programming. But Deep Sea Adventures, it's a press your luck game where you have a diver and you have to decide when you're going to come up. And it's one that I've had a lot of fun with my 8-year-old and 11-year-old, one that I got in a trade about a year ago. And it's come out more Saturday mornings than I thought it would in that time. Plays quick. We get a game done in 10 to 15 minutes. Also plays 2 to 6 players, so we can play it with the whole family. In terms of a quick push your luck game, it is one that I really enjoy. So that's my number 3 game. Third favorite game from 2014 is Deep Sea Adventures.
Awesome. My number 3 is a game called Diamonds. It is a trick-taking game from Stronghold Games and Mike Fitzgerald. What I like about this is it's a trick-taking game that has their traditional card suits, feels very much like euchre or something like that, just very streamlined. But the thing that it does is that it adds abilities to each of the suits, which if you've ever played a trick-taking game, and I'm thinking specifically of the games I've played over the course of my life of euchre, and you get stuck with a garbage hand, low numbers, or you can't really do anything, this game allows you to do things with off-suited low-number cards that actually give them abilities. You're playing cards trying to get little diamond tokens into your vault, and you can steal them and do that. And so there's a way to have a complete garbage hand and really do well in this game if you play your cards right. And I love that. Has a little bit of that Red 7 type of puzzle where I'm trying to figure out, okay, how can I maximize the cards that I have to get the best bonuses from those? And that's why I really like that, because anybody that's played a lot of trick-taking games, there's nothing worse than getting a whole mitt full of 9s and 10s and being like,
got to bluff your way out of it, Doug.
Bluff your way out of it. Doesn't exist. That's my number 3, Diamonds.
Awesome. My number 2 is Orleans. And keep talking. No crossover there, huh?
No, I'm trying to figure out what your number 1 is.
Gotcha. Orleans is a game designed by
now I know what
Reiner
it is.
Stockhausen. Had you there? Had you fooled? You thought I was going to go with a different Reiner Stockhausen. And in Orleans, it's a bag builder. So you're pulling tiles out of bags, and you're trying. What do you have here? A town, not a university. I almost said a university. You have a town that you're trying to build out and optimize and get better chips into your bag. And it's a nice little efficiency puzzle that I certainly need to play more of, because I'm struggling with a decent description of it as we talk about our 47th game of this episode. But my second favorite game from 2014 is Orleans.
All right. My number 2 is Splendor. Michael talked about it earlier. I love the engine building of this game as you take the gem chips and trade those in for cards, which then give you permanent gems going forward as you are able to acquire stronger and stronger cards throughout the game. Just a phenomenal when we talked about it in episode 23. That's my number 2, Splendor.
Awesome. My number 1 game from 2014 is Sheriff of Nottingham, episode 121, game of the week. Doug mentioned it earlier. I love Sheriff. If I had to take one game with me from 2014, I would pull Sheriff because of it's just different. It's unique. It stands on its own, and it plays at high player counts. It plays with 3 players pretty well too. And I just have not had a terrible experience with it, unless it's been so terrible that it's funny and memorable. And I think that is what games should be about. So it's my favorite game from 2014. You called that one correctly, Doug.
Yep. And my number one is Orleans by DLP Games and Capstone. And this is, Michael mentioned it, you're putting workers and people from the village into your bag, drawing them out, and then placing them in different locations on your personal player board and a public player board in order to acquire new workers and trigger abilities. And so it's got this cute artwork and a cool style of putting it out and then kind of waiting there and like, I hope I have the stuff to complete this. You kind of have it waiting out to finish up. And so one of the heavier games that I enjoy and simple to teach and fun to get going. So that is Orleans. I had Star Realms, Camel Up, Scoville, Patchwork on my honorable mentions, just didn't make the list. How about you?
Yeah, I had Diamonds. That was the number 11 for me.
Awesome. So that's our top 10 from 2014. Subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already. Follow us on X at GameSchoolerU. Join our Discord, gameschooler.com/Discord. Next week, we're going to be talking about Forbidden Jungle, adapting hobby games to classrooms, and classic games that deserve more respect. Thank you so much for spending the last hour or so with us. We truly appreciate it.
Now get out there and keep gaming.